Welcome back to Mad Blood. I'm Matt McFarlane. Now, let's be honest with each other and admit, sometimes during the holidays, there's a tiny bit of you that doesn't necessarily want to kill anyone, but you start to go a little crazy after Aunt Cindy starts to tell you to have a little more Christmas spirit for the 12th time. Maybe thinking about stabbing her in the eye with a candy cane is a little justified at this point, but we also know Christmas horror can go a lot of different ways. Some movies get a little too Christmassy and some movies get a little dark for the holiday, but it's kind of rare when you get that blend of 80s cheese melted into a little fondue pot with some great gore and solid Christmas vibes. Oh, and by 80s cheese, I mean a lot of it.
Of the dark.
So today I'll be reviewing one that does, which is the very unhinged cult classic naughty Santa Claus movie, Silent Night, Deadly Night from 1984. If you're a horror fan and you haven't seen this movie, you've probably heard about it though, but let me run down a little plot synopsis for you real quick. So the story essentially follows Billy, who as a kid saw some wild shit when he witnessed his parents get murdered on Christmas Eve by a dude dressed up as Santa. I mean, pretty terrible, right? But then on top of that, he has a horrible childhood in an abusive orphanage. Well, this person's name is Billy Chapman, and then as an adult, he has this psychological breakdown because all these Christmas lights and Santas and fake people saying happy holidays pretty much breaks him and makes him go on a killing spree. All right, well, next, I want to get into some of the things I think Silent Night, Deadly Night does well. But first, I want to talk to you about the sponsor for today's video, which is Patreon. If you feel like supporting my dumbass in another totally optional way and want some more content, head on over to my Patreon, where there's a ton of perks you can't get anywhere else for as little as $1 a month. There's commentary tracks to play alongside movies and regular early releases of content so you can see videos before anyone else does. But anyways, now let's get into some of the things I think Silent Night, Deadly Night does well. I enjoy how this movie takes us on kind of a different approach than a lot of slashers do by taking us on this journey with the killer instead of like most horror movies do where we follow the victims, then the killer just kind of pops up here and there. I enjoy that, which is probably why this movie feels so batshit crazy because you're spending a big chunk of the movie following a dude that has pretty much lost his mind. Oh, and this movie's 80-something minutes, so you're in and you're kind of just out, and I'm okay with that. Now, the next thing is just a personal positive to me, but most of the cast in this movie is from Utah, and the movie was filmed in Heber City in Midway, Utah. I went to the University of Utah for college. I'm up in the Heber area all the time, so you probably don't really give a shit, but this is my review, so to me, that's a little something there that's kind of cool, and I enjoy that when I watch the movie. I also love the 80s corniness in this movie, which obviously adds a ton of charm to it. There's so many lines and moments in this movie that would just never happen in a movie today. Even if you tried to replicate it and make it an 80s movie like this, I'm sorry, it's just not gonna happen without a time machine. This is also one of those movies where you get to follow the origin story of the killer, which is something we've never really seen with killers like Jason, especially earlier in the Friday franchise. We did get that eventually from Michael and Rob Zombie's movies, but earlier on in the franchise, we didn't. So I like that. It's not just about a guy who was born to kill. It's a little bit different. We see how not every crazy person out there was just always meant to be that dude screaming wild shit on the side of the road. Sometimes a crazy society kind of just snowballs and creates more lunatics that want to murder people. It also makes you feel bad for this poor little kid who had to go through so much shit. Speaking of shit, there is so much Christmas shit in this movie. The Christmas vibes are very on point. You know, in some Christmas horror movies, it's kind of trickled in there a little bit here and there. It's not like an actual part of the story. Like Black Christmas, an all-time classic movie, which I'll shamelessly plug my review of right here. But what happens in Black Christmas could happen really anytime there's a break from school in that movie. In this movie, though, this movie's all about Christmas time. It's not just a part of the movie. Christmas is kind of the meat and taters of the movie. Plus, it's probably the only time of year you can run around as a fucking Santa and get away with it without the police just thinking you're running around flashing people with your little baby dick under that thing. Also, a little shout out to Andy for drinking J&B like our old pal RJ McCready. By the way, anyone else think it's funny how this movie reminds us, well, a lot of companies just quit letting everyone get shit-faced at the office for the work Christmas party? One minute you're chatting with your boss about work and your kid's school, and then 10 shots later, Bob's over there trying to pull Margaret from accounting into the supply room. But the drunk whole office Toy Story scene is an example of just the silly fun times this movie blends with the horrific moments, which is why it has such a cult following. Speaking of horrific moments, the kills in this movie are a jolly good fucking time. Santa gets in plenty of punishment, and it's fun just to kind of see how some of the kills are pulled off in a Christmassy kind of way. There's also a ton of variety to the kills in this movie. One guy gets strangled with Christmas lights. His boss gets the hammer in the head. Billy decapitates some dickhead who's out sledding that night. And of course, we can't forget probably the most memorable death in the movie, which is when he hangs up Denise on the antlers and hits at some of those punish line quotas for the movie.
Punished! Punished! Punished!
I also enjoy the little twist at the end and the ambiguous ending, setting up the sequels. All right, next, there's really only one negative that I want to mention about this movie, which to me is the first act of the movie. So maybe I'm kind of a pansy, but the whole scene with Santa violating his mom and slowly killing her in front of the cute little kids is a little bit much for me. It's probably because I'm a dad, but it's kind of tough. Everyone's got their triggers and stuff. Go ahead and throw a topless college girl on some antlers. That's fine, but I just feel bad for those cute little kids. So yeah, not really a big fan of that scene, even though it's one of the most important scenes in Billy's whole character story. But anyways, here are my final thoughts on Silent Night, Deadly Night. And it's easy to see why this movie's a cult classic Christmas slasher. It's got great kills, funny, corny 80s moments with some great holiday vibes. I haven't seen the sequels yet, but I've heard they're even more batshit crazy. So I'm excited to check those out. But overall, Silent Night, Deadly Night's a good time when you're in the mood for kind of a bloody 80s cheesy little adventure. Oh, and just a little heads up, this movie's a little bit hard to find on some of the streaming services. You can rent it though in HD on the iTunes store. That's where I found it. Just a little heads up on that. But anyways, that's it for me. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming winter horror videos. Go and check out my review of Black Christmas right here next to me. But I'm Matt McFarland, and take care of yourselves during this holiday season, or I'll punish your ass.